Hello, fellow readers and booktubers. This is the Snob-O-Meter book tag, or the Snob-O-Meter book tag. This tag was created by that reading guy 28, and I was tagged by Pat at Book Chat with Pat, who was tagged by John at Must Read More, and James at Quaint and Curious Volumes. This tag first popped up almost a week ago. That's when I first saw it, and it's really making the rounds. It's very popular. It's kind of fun. I did give it some thought. My initial responses, I had to reconsider and rein them in a little bit because I thought I might be hurting the feelings of some people who are friends of mine. And then I thought, well, wait a minute. If my responses on these questions about book snobbery might give offense to people, doesn't that imply that I'm a book snob? You know, snobs are jerks. They look down on other people because of other people's choices are different than their own. And who wants to be a jerk? I think that when we're younger, we all go through a certain period of snobbery in our younger lives. And that just has a lot to do with, we're searching for an identity and who do we want to be in the world and all of that. But once you get to a certain age, you should start shedding those attitudes and be more secure in who you are. And so the snobbery is something they should just abandon. And I'm certainly at that point in my life. To be a snob is a childish thing. And I'm certainly not a child anymore. So anyway, I really liked this tag. At first, it seemed kind of funny and fun, and then it caused me to look at myself a little more closely, and really consider what my feelings are about books and reading books. And so, anyway, with that in mind, here are my questions, or here are my responses to the various prompts. The first one is, what is your definition of book snobbery? I've kind of already given that one. A book snob is someone who will look down on others because of their choice or preference in reading material. To be a snob is to be a jerk. Right? There's no other way to put it. There are snobs in lots of things. There are food snobs and movie snobs and music snobs. But a snob is anyone who will look down at other people because the other people have preferences that are different than the snob's preference. And it's unfair. It's to have a very narrow view. It's a sign of, I don't think it's a sign of arrogance. I think it's a sign of deep insecurity. So that's a book snobbery. Is there a genre or type of book you would never consider reading? Such as, would you ever read a romance? Or if you regularly read romance, would you ever try a science fiction novel? I'm not all that doctrinaire or that rigid in my choice. I mean, there are certain kinds of books that I prefer more than others. But I'm pretty open to pretty much anything. I don't think I've ever actually read a romance, but if I start to hear about a particular romance that was a cut above other romances, or that has really attracted the attention of more people than a romance usually attracts, and this is a remarkable book, I would give it a try. I would read it and see what all the excitement is about. I think the only books I would not consider reading would be grotesque political type books. Steve Donahue had responded to these prompts, and I noticed in his responses he predicted that there's going to be a whole drove of Donald Trump books coming out, written by nothing written by Trump because he can't write, but by his advisors, or ghost written by his supporters and all that, which are going to be some horrible, vile things coming down the pike. I'll probably avoid those, but outside of that, there's really nothing I don't think I would consider reading. Okay. Does erotica count as literature? Well, there's a tricky one. Let's see. Erotica as opposed to pornography? What's the difference between erotica and pornography? I keep thinking about that very famous Supreme Court case. I think this goes back to the 1960s. And one of the Supreme Court justices said, well, I can't define pornography, but I know it when I see it. Yes, erotica counts as literature. Yes, it does. Any written work is literature by definition. So yeah, erotica counts as literature. Might not be the kind of thing I'm interested in, but it is still literature. Is it better to read classic books than popular bestsellers? Well, here's the thing about this. Today's bestseller might be tomorrow's classic, and what's considered a classic today might be forgotten tomorrow. These things shift and change. I think it's best to read whatever brings you joy, whatever stimulates you intellectually, whatever entertains you. Go for it. I wouldn't, rule out reading classics in favor of popular bestsellers, nor would I rule out reading popular bestsellers in favor of classics. Don't even go there. Just any book that looks interesting to you, that seems to be dealing with a topic or a theme that attracts your attention, any book that presents itself in a way that you would find entertaining, go for it. Don't worry about the classic or popular bestseller thing. Let those let time decide those labels. All right? Have you ever bragged about reading a classic in order to sound smart? No, I have not. I have never lied about reading a book. Do audiobooks count as reading? What about comic books or graphic novels? This is, I posted a short quite a few months ago. I wasn't entirely serious about it, but I said that something like, if you have to use a password and charge a battery, then what you're looking at is not a book, it's something else. I did not mean to offend people, but some people were kind of upset by that. I apologize because what I didn't take into consideration is that there are some people, because of physical challenges or even emotional challenges, cannot actually sit and read a book. Audiobooks is where they have to go. And God bless them. And I think that's a fine thing. So, although, again, Steve Donahue does make a distinction. He said, oh, here come the police. Life in the big city. Steve Donahue made a distinction between audiobooks and paper books. It's actually a distinction between reading and listening. Those are two different things, require a different part of your brain. Reading and listening are not the same things. The results can be similar, but they're two different things. It's apples and oranges. So is listening to an audiobook the same as reading? No, but it kind of, one can substitute for the other depending on circumstances. And I'm going to go with that. The comic books or graphic novels thing, oh gosh, I'm going to get in trouble for this one. First of all, I don't get the difference between a graphic novel and a comic book. A graphic novel is a comic book. And my experience with comic books goes back to when I was very young, and comic books cost about 12 cents, and they sold them at the corner drugstore. And comic books were about superheroes and monsters and scary stuff and all of that. And they're written and drawn for children. They're just picture books with words. I'm sorry, I'm not going to budge on this one. Looking at a comic book or a graphic novel, if it brings you joy, good for you. But no, you're not reading. You're kind of almost aggressively not reading. Okay. Have you ever looked down at someone for reading a popular fluff book? A book with little substance to it, for example, a self-help book or a celebrity memoir. There was a time in my life when I might have done that. I did do that. I don't anymore. If I get on a train or an airplane or something, I see people reading books, I don't go through and check the titles on the books. I'm just happy to see people reading books. Good for you. Let's keep this very human activity alive. So if I see someone reading, I don't care what you're reading. As long as you're reading, you're okay by me. I have no complaint. Have you ever been the recipient of someone else's snobbery? Yes, indeed, I have. I think quite often when we think about snobbery, we think of someone who imagines himself or someone who might be in kind of a superior position, looking down on others as their inferiors. So a snob would be someone who would say, I only read 19th century Russian literature. If you don't read that, you're less than me. But snobbery cuts in the other direction as well. And where I've encountered it is I love Shakespeare. I've always liked Shakespeare. I was very fortunate My first exposure to Shakespeare was in high school. I just had a great teacher. And from that time on, I've read Shakespeare's plays over and over again. I read books about Shakespeare. But I have noticed that I have to be careful who I share this with, because some people would view that as, in fact, that I was putting on airs, that I'm being snobbish because I like Shakespeare. And they would put me down for that. Or even worse, there are people who don't understand Shakespeare, and so they intimate that I'm faking it when I say that I like Shakespeare. And that is a kind of snobbery. They're looking at me like, oh, you're just faking it. You don't know what Shakespeare. You can't read Shakespeare. Nobody reads Shakespeare. As if there's been this 500-year conspiracy among Shakespeare lovers that they don't understand Shakespeare, but they want other people to think that they do, so those other people will feel stupid. That's not true, but it is a snobbery. I've been criticized for liking Shakespeare. I've had people suggest that I'm faking it somehow, and that's hurtful. But yeah, that is a kind of snobbery directed against me. Would you ever be friends with a snob? Yes, and I do have friends who are book snobs, that's for sure. There's an upside to that, however. If I don't read much in the way of genre fiction. I don't read a lot of mysteries, for example. But if I should be in the mood for reading a mystery someday, I would turn to a friend of mine who reads nothing but mysteries and ask for a recommendation. And I'd probably get a pretty good recommendation. I'm part of the academic world, and I know certain teachers of literature who specialize in a particular field of literature. And if I was interested in something in that field, I would turn to them for their recommendation and advice. So, I am friends with snobs. They're not necessarily, they can be annoying, that's for sure. But there's the upside there is that they can give you some insight into other kinds of writing. Are people who don't read less sophisticated than people who do? Absolutely. People who do not read have, for whatever reason, embraced a very narrow view of life. And you can usually tell who they are. They're more prone to be led by falsehoods. People who don't read have a dull critical thinking apparatus. They're easily taken in by political demagogues. They can be petty, they'll be bigoted, they'll be misogynistic, they'll be racist, they'll be homophobic, xenophobic, and all those things I would regard as being signs of a lack of sophistication. And it's almost always people who do not read books are much more prone to that. So I would have to say, without any qualification, my unqualified response to this one is that people who do not read are less sophisticated than people who do. Number 11, measure yourself. Based on your answers to the previous 10 questions, would you qualify as a book snob? I don't think so, but I am I'm on the spectrum, I think. But I don't think I'm insufferably a book snob. And then tag some people, and I will do that. If I don't tag you, you can assume that you are tagged. I think this is a great tag. I really think it's great for a lot of reasons. I know for myself, it forced me to take a good hard look at myself and my own attitude towards reading and books. So anyway, that's all I've got for you today. Be well, keep reading, and take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.